Imagine wanting sex without a baby, but your pharmacy is a basket, your medical textbook is a papyrus, and one of the suggested ingredients may have recently left a crocodile. Ancient people absolutely tried to prevent pregnancy. The surprise is not that they were clueless, it is that some of their ideas were anatomically sensible, some were accidental chemical, and some required a level of confidence normally associated with handling snakes. The first problem is language. Ancient writers did not always separate contraception, abortion, menstrual regulation, infertility treatment, and magic as neatly as a modern clinic would. A recipe described as bringing on the monthly flow might have been used after a missed period. A substance called contraceptive might actually have harmed an early pregnancy. And many practices were transmitted orally, especially by women and midwives, so the written record is only the part that survived male scribes, damaged manuscripts, and 2,000 years of people losing things.
Still, the evidence begins remarkably early. Egyptian medical papyri preserve recipes intended to stop conception. One famous family of mixtures combined honey, plant material such as acacia, and lint or fiber, then placed the mixture inside the vagina. To modern eyes, this looks less like sorcery and more like an extremely uncomfortable prototype barrier method. The thick material may have physically obstructed sperm. Acacia gum can also produce acidic compounds during fermentation, and acidity can reduce sperm movement. That does not prove the ancient recipe was reliably effective. It does mean somebody may have reached a partly useful mechanism without knowing what a sperm cell was. Then there is the ingredient everyone remembers: crocodile dung. Some Egyptian sources have been interpreted as recommending animal excrement mixed with honey, sour milk, or mineral salts and inserted vaginally. The exact translation and composition are not always certain. Even if the mixture created an unfriendly chemical environment for sperm, it could also create an extremely friendly environment for infection. This is the recurring pattern of ancient medicine. The theory is missing, the quality control is imaginary, and occasionally the mechanism wanders into the correct room.
Honey itself made more sense than it sounds. It is sticky, it can act as a physical barrier, and it has antimicrobial properties under some conditions. But has useful properties is not the same as works as contraception. Ancient users had no standardized dose, no controlled trial, and no discrete leaflet explaining that a jar from one village might not behave like a jar from another. Humanity had made a product. Manufacturing standards would arrive later. Not every method was material. Amulets, spoken formulas, knots, charms, and ritual actions also appear in ancient reproductive medicine. It is easy to dismiss them as irrational, but ritual could coexist with practical treatment. A person might use a sticky pessary and a protective charm for the same reason a modern traveler checks the door twice after locking it. One action addresses the mechanism, the other addresses the terror of not being certain. The charm did not stop sperm. It may still have made an uncontrollable situation feel briefly negotiable.
The evidence also has a survival problem. A ceramic jar can remain in the ground. Instructions whispered by a midwife cannot. Medical texts tend to preserve the interests of literate elites, while ordinary people may have used local plants, sexual practices, and household knowledge that were never written down. Even when a recipe survives, historians may not know whether it was common, rare, symbolic, mistranslated, or copied for centuries by people who never tried it. A surviving prescription proves that somebody recorded an idea. It does not prove that every woman in Egypt was calmly assembling it beside the bread. The Greeks and Romans expanded the menu. Medical authors discussed oils, resins, gums, alum, vinegar, brine, honey, and plant preparations applied before intercourse. Some were meant to coat the cervix or the surrounding area. Sticky substances might have formed a partial barrier. Acidic substances might have reduced sperm motility. Oils could interfere with movement, although they could also irritate tissue or simply fail. Other ingredients, including white lead, introduced the minor inconvenience of being poisonous.
One physician writing in the Roman world distinguished methods intended to prevent conception from methods intended to end a pregnancy. That distinction matters because it shows a surprisingly clear conceptual goal: stop the process before it starts. His recommendations included coating the uterine opening with oily or sticky substances, avoiding intercourse at times he believed were fertile, limiting deep penetration, and removing semen afterward. The anatomy was imperfect and his fertility model was incomplete and unreliable, but the overall strategy, timing, barrier, behavior, and post-coital action looks eerily like a clinic designed by someone who had the correct filing cabinets and put several documents in the wrong drawers. The post-coital instructions become more theatrical. A woman might be told to squat, sneeze, stand, wipe, wash, or move in ways intended to expel semen. These actions are not reliable contraception. Once sperm have entered the reproductive tract, gravity does not become a customer service department. But the advice reveals something important. Ancient people understood that semen was involved, that location mattered, and that preventing its progress might prevent pregnancy. They had identified the suspect. They had not yet developed a secure perimeter.
Withdrawal was probably one of the most accessible methods because it required no ingredients, merchant, literacy, or crocodile. Evidence for exactly how widely it was practiced is frustratingly thin, and ancient texts can be vague. But versions of avoiding ejaculation inside the vagina were known. In real-world use, withdrawal can reduce pregnancy risk compared with doing nothing, while remaining far less reliable than many modern methods. Its ancient performance depended on timing, cooperation, and a man displaying self-control at the one moment history has never trusted him to provide it. Abstinence was more reliable. It was also abstinence. People could avoid intercourse completely, restrict it for religious or social reasons, or attempt to time it around menstruation. Unfortunately, without an accurate understanding of ovulation, calendar methods could be confidently wrong. Some Greek medical thinking placed peak fertility close to the end of menstruation, which can overlap with fertile days for some cycles, but is not a universal rule. Menstrual cycles vary. Sperm can survive for days, and ovulation does not consult a stone calendar.
There was, however, one powerful form of birth spacing that did not come from a pharmacy at all: breastfeeding. Frequent breastfeeding can suppress ovulation for a period after birth. Modern lactational amenorrhea is considered dependable only under specific conditions, including no return of menstruation, very frequent or near exclusive breastfeeding, and a baby younger than 6 months. Ancient families did not have those criteria printed on a wall, but prolonged frequent breastfeeding could naturally lengthen intervals between births. This was not perfect contraception, and fertility could return before the first visible period. Nature provided a temporary system with no indicator light. Now the story changes because the most famous ancient contraceptive may be more legend than solution. Silphium was a valuable plant product associated with Cyrene in North Africa. Ancient sources treated it as medicine, seasoning, and possibly a means of controlling fertility. It appeared on coins and became enormously valuable. Later stories say the plant was harvested into extinction because Romans could not stop buying birth control. The reality is less tidy. Its exact botanical identity is disputed, the scale of its contraceptive use is uncertain, and claims about why it disappeared are difficult to prove.
This does not make silphium boring, it makes it a perfect ancient pharmaceutical, commercially famous, medically versatile, botanically mysterious, and unavailable for testing. Related plants can contain biologically active compounds, but that does not establish a safe or effective dose for the lost product. The ancient consumer was buying a prestigious resin with a reputation, not a regulated medication with a known failure rate. The coin was real, the confidence was real, the clinical data had apparently missed the caravan. Other plants were used across the ancient Mediterranean and beyond as contraceptives, menstrual stimulants, or abortifacients. Some may contain active compounds. Some are simply toxic. Those categories can overlap badly because a dose strong enough to affect reproduction may also damage the liver, kidneys, nervous system, or the person generally attached to them. Ancient recipes often leave quantities unclear. Plant names can be ambiguous, and species vary by region. Take a little is not reassuring when a little was copied by a scribe who had never met the plant.
This is the midpoint nobody enjoys admitting. Ancient birth control was not only a collection of strange objects, it was a system of risk transferred mostly onto women. They inserted the mixtures, swallowed the plants, endured the procedures, carried the pregnancies, and faced the consequences when a method failed. Men could participate through withdrawal or abstinence, but much of the surviving medical advice treated the female body as the workshop, testing site, and complaint department. And failure mattered more than an awkward morning. Pregnancy and childbirth carried serious danger. Another child could strain food, labor, inheritance, housing, or a woman's health. Enslaved women, sex workers, married women, and elite women faced different pressures and very different levels of choice. We should be careful not to invent one universal ancient woman. A remedy that represented agency for one person could be coercion for another.
When contraception failed, ancient societies also used abortion, newborn exposure, and infanticide to limit families. These are not contraceptive methods, and combining them into one cheerful list hides the enormous moral and physical differences. But historically, they belong to the same larger question. How did people control reproduction when prevention was unreliable? Sometimes the answer came before conception. Sometimes it came after. Sometimes the final decision was made by someone with more legal or household power than the pregnant woman. So which ancient method would you trust if modern contraception vanished? Withdrawal? A honey and acacia barrier? Strict abstinence? Or the mysterious plant sold by a merchant who insists it is definitely genuine? Put your choice in the comments, but remember that none of them is historically sensible and inconveniently outside the scenario.
The real answer is that ancient people avoided pregnancy through layers of imperfect defense. They changed sexual behavior. They used withdrawal and abstinence. They tried timing. They relied on breastfeeding for spacing. They inserted barriers and chemical mixtures. They consumed plants. And when prevention failed, some turned to far more dangerous or irreversible measures. No single method explains ancient fertility control. Ancient people, like modern people, combined whatever knowledge, access, power, and desperation they had. A few ideas contained fragments of real science. A sticky pessary can block. An acidic environment can affect sperm. Frequent breastfeeding can delay ovulation. Withdrawal can reduce exposure. But fragments are not reliability. A method can have a plausible mechanism and still fail often, cause injury, or work only under conditions nobody understood well enough to reproduce.
That is the final contradiction. Ancient contraception was neither pure nonsense nor hidden modern medicine. It was observation without microbiology, experimentation without trials, and urgent problem-solving without safe materials. The papyrus, the honey, the resin, and even the unfortunate crocodile all belong to the same human instinct. People wanted control over when life began long before they had the tools to control it well. So return to that basket pharmacy. You have honey, lint, a suspicious plant, and advice to sneeze at exactly the right moment. The absurdity is real. So is the intelligence behind it. Ancient people did not fail to understand the problem. They understood the stakes perfectly. What they lacked was a method that did not require hope to be one of the active ingredients.